In our entrepreneurship feature, we continue with our conversation around beliefs and underlying assumptions that are holding you back from being a great leader. This is the second part of the conversation. We continue the conversation because there were a lot of questions that arose from last week's conversation. 2 weeks ago, I think, with Andisa Ramavhunga. He's already here in the studio, as you can hear. I want to start very quickly because it gets really congested. Andisa, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Andisa, by the way, is Group Chief Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting. Second installment of this conversation. What were the main features of the first, so that we can just remind our listeners?
Yep, Aubrey. Yep. Thank you for having me again. It has been 2 weeks. It feels like a lifetime, it has been 2 weeks.
It does.
Remember, we started by saying we're going to discuss 5 of these inhibiting beliefs that limit us from becoming great leaders, or it's stopping us from building great organizations. And we started with toxic politicking, or playing petty politics, as one of the inhibiting factor. And by the way, you'll realize that whenever there is politics in an organization, it's always a function of a leader, right? Once you start building factions around the organizations, you start not being transparent about decision making, also not being consistent about process and outcomes of those process. When you're also a vested interest and you're starting to run the organization using rumors or gossip, you must understand and be aware that you as a leader, you enable that. And that, by the way, inhibits the culture of a great organization. And if you are to build a great organization, you need to understand that it's at the back of a very dominant core belief, right? Which is made up of a dominant set of values. And there's a concept that Jim Collins refers to of a cult-like culture. If you don't have those dominant values and those dominant purpose that drives the organization, you can't build a culture-like culture. And most of the time, you come out with the best intention of doing all these things, because as entrepreneurs, we're very great at putting these things on paper, to saying these are our vision and mission, and saying these are our values, these are our norms and standards. And yet, when we execute our day-to-day duties, we more often than not violate most of those cultures. So we started by saying that is something that a leader must be aware of. And again, I would like to put it in context, Aubrey. I'm not sure if our listeners understood yesterday, to say we're not talking leadership out of a vacuum, right? We're talking leadership out of becoming a business architect, which is made up of 3 things, leadership being included. But the most dominant one that you and I talk about a lot is the strategy element, which is the business model. And then there's the operating model element, which is the organizational design element. And in there lies in the aspect of culture when you're designing the organization. And as a leader, you play a great role in influencing. In fact, you play almost everything in influencing both strategy and operating model, right? Strategy from a point of a vision and a mission. Where are we going to compete? What set of capabilities are we going to build? What sort of pricing model do we put in place? What is our cost structure? What are our key activities and key infrastructure that we'll need? And then you'll come back when you understand your key activities or the work to be done, to come back now to the operating model, to say, what is our organizational structure? What sort of people do we need? What sort of job design do we build into it? What sort of culture, as well as operating or governance models, as well as incentives? You must understand that your role as a leader is to influence both of that. And again, there is the school of thoughts we've defined, or various school of thoughts, one from a capability point of view of leadership, one from a mindset point of view of leadership. But today, all we are saying is that you can do all of these things great, but you can quickly undermine them by and then there are many of these factors, by the way, but this, I think, for me, is my top 5 based on my observation. So creating a toxic culture, and you do this unaware, by the way, it's one thing that a leader must desist from. And again, there's the other topics that we've discussed, Aubrey, around the types of intelligence that a leader needs.
Yes.
And two of the dominant ones, if you remember, was IQ and EQ. And IQ, we said, is more than mathematics. You have people who are linguistically gifted, people who are musically gifted, people who are able-bodied, athletes gifted. I think we all have our own IQ or intelligence that God has endowed, or let me just say, our environment has endowed us on. And those more often than not impact on the strategy side of things and less on the organizational design and leadership, because mostly they are about problem solving, and it's about creating processes and structures to solve problems. And to me, it's probably a much easier thing to do than the other EQ side now, which is about people. It's about self-awareness, it's about social awareness, it's about self-regulating, it's about the relationship with others. And EQ plays a great deal in us understanding when we are starting to play politics. And at some point, I'd like to unpack EQ as one of maybe the topics, because there's quite a lot we can unpack there so that we can demystify. And by the way, if we define it for ourselves, then we can implement it in our day-to-day lives. So the first one was toxic politicking, right? The second other one was lack of delegation. And this happens a lot, particularly when you are starting something out, right? Where you have very little trust in people. Yeah. You think your way is the right way, so you don't believe other people can do what you can do. And more often than not, it's born out of more our managerial or our management capabilities, because we arise into these leadership positions based on what our capabilities are. Yeah. And most of those capabilities are more functional by nature. You're either a doctor, or you're an accountant, or you're an engineer, and you're able to draw great design, but you lack in what we call leadership. And again, I'm coming back now to define that leadership, to say, look, a great part of leadership is management. I find that if you are weak in management, your leadership ability also weakens. But that does not mean management is leadership, right? Because you have to build over on top of those layers of leadership, like Jim Collins in his model of level 5 leadership, where I think the top 3 levels around management and the last 2 levels around leadership now, on creating vision, enrolling others, managing those paradoxes again that we've defined in our last conversation.
I want to quickly jump in there. My apologies, Andisa. On the issue of delegation, and perhaps when leaders don't delegate as they ought to, does that in any way have to do with the stage of development of the organization? Because I imagine that at the founding stage, right at the beginning of that business, you are everything as the founder. You are the manager, you are the until such time as the business grows to a point where you have people to delegate responsibilities to. So talk to me a little bit about the phases the organization goes through and the types of leader that would be required in each phase of that same business.
So Aubrey, it has less to do, or my belief, it has less to do with the stage of a business and more to do with whether you're working alone or with other people, because that's where delegation starts. You can be a 2 or 3 man startup, and you can micromanage everyone like hell, right? And that will more often than not lead, particularly those good people who are creative, that leave that business. So you need to start the art of delegation from the onset. And by the way, you get very matured organization where, again, micromanagement is a big inhibitor of leadership. Because think about it this way, Aubrey, whether you're a startup or you are a fully fledged maturing business, in this modern world, there's a greater demand that we innovate, and that innovation is more often than not born out of collaboration. Something that Linda Hill out of Harvard calls it the slices of genius. It's to say, we are all geniuses in our own way.
Right.
How do we put our collective genius together create that sustainable advantage, right? So again, you'll come back and say, look, even if when you are starting up, if you have two other geniuses, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, right? It's much better to delegate. And again, there's a science to delegation. But before maybe I get to come back to delegation, let's understand the impact of delegation. One, the organization will lose agility, because if everything is centered around the leader, then you lose that speed of moving, or that ability to move with speed. And in our modern environment, someone will come quicker with lunch and competition coming in every day. Your ability to service customers as well is greatly inhibited, because you have disempowered your people. Your ability to build those systems we talk about is also inhibited, because no one is willing to take any decisions, because they know that the boss will come back and reverse them. So it has very dire consequences on the flexibility, agility of a business to do myriad of things on strategy, on organizational design, as well as competing in the environment. So I think let's just maybe agree that it does not matter the stage. You still need agility. You still need the flexibility. What I think you should be investing on is the trust element of delegation, because that's where the biggest problem lies, because you do not have the belief that people are capable, and people are as committed as you. And the commitment one, I think, feeds into that political one as well. But there is a framework, right, that says maybe you do need to compartmentalize people. There are those people that are as capable, if not more capable than you, and they are committed. There, at least you need to have, again, EQ comes in, that self-awareness and that social awareness to say, here, I'm working with someone who is very competent, and from my ability to judge character, I can test that commitment point of view. So if someone is committed and capable, you let them run. You provide just some structure for feedback, but you allow them the freedom.
Give us a call on 011-883-0702. We're talking entrepreneurship, but more specifically, we're talking leadership. And we are talking about all of those beliefs and assumptions that limit your leadership in your organization. And we've already spoken of the 2 out of 5, I suppose, factors that may be responsible for that. So first is
toxicity, and playing petty politics.
Petty politics in the organizations, cliques, and
cliques and all of those.
Second one,
it's the art of delegation.
The art of delegation. I want to go to 3, 4, and 5. And then maybe we'll unpack them as we continue. Give me the 3, 4, and 5, at least so that they can percolate in the minds of our listeners. Please give us a call, 011-883-0702. Do you recognize some of these beliefs and assumptions that limit your leadership capability in your organization? Please give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.
Number 3 is a sister to number 2, something we call an imposter syndrome. I know I suffered this a lot in my career as I was growing up, when you don't feel you have a right to dictate to people. And think about it. On a startup, you more often than not start up with your peers, right? People who often than not, they have some different skill from yours. And sometimes your leadership, everyone recognizes your leadership, but except yourself. And it happens a lot with humble leaders. I guess it's always this doubt or self-doubt that comes out of saying, but why me? Or do I have a right to dictate? Am I old enough? Age plays a big role, particularly for
especially in cultural spaces.
Right. And that could inhibit a lot, because one, it breaks down self-confidence. It limits your ability to give people feedback, which is essential in a growing organization. It limits your ability to performance manage people, which is business is
about that.
Is all about that. So that's number 3, and I say it goes hand in hand, because you'll find more often than not people who are particularly new to leadership, they tend to gravitate towards doing their functional stuff, and this is where now they stop delegating and frustrating everyone else. Number 4 for me is also very key. And by the way, they're not in any particular order. I'm just putting up the top 5 as it is. Number 4 is the leader's inability to self-reflect, accept and assimilate feedback. We as leaders are so righteous, right? Because we are so strong-minded in our ideas and with perfectionism as well. You've got your way of wanting to do things, and you can quickly kill the culture of innovation and proactiveness and self-starting. And if you are not aware of that, by the way, if you don't reflect, take time to reflect, and it becomes very spiritual, right?
Yes.
And accept feedback from multiple levels, right? From your juniors to your peers to even your elders or to your community who are seeing you running a business, and that ability to accept feedback, assimilate it more importantly. You know, I grew up, I've had the fortunate opportunity of working in consulting firms, most of big top consulting firms. And the biggest thing they push there is around feedback. You learn every day. You are given feedback every day, whether it's good feedback and a bad feedback. But obviously, they all mostly hop on the bad feedback, which for me is a great thing because it's identifying your weaknesses and giving you an opportunity to build those or turn those weaknesses into strength. And again, and it's very tough, particularly in our culture. I mean, you can imagine when you get feedback from a young child who tells you, "Oh, but you coming maybe at work late is setting the wrong tone," right? He might be saying the right thing, but you might you might be thinking to yourself, "Oh, but is this man challenging my authority? And I'm the boss. I take what is going." So you do need that humility to be able to self-reflect. Be aware, accept and assimilate feedback. Feedback is a gift. You use it or you don't use it. I mean, I always say, people who care about you will always give you feedback. It's up to you to distill, to say, does that feedback make sense or does it not? If it leads to it not making or it making sense, it means I need to do something about it. Or else I can let it go. I do not believe you are any loser in any type of feedback that you are given. So we do need to be open and receptive to us assimilating feedback, right?
Yeah.
The final one is also, I guess it's tied to perfectionism. When you and we do this greatly, right? I mean, I remember when I used to, those of the people who are in the consulting world, when I used to do a story deck on slides, and there's a point, obviously I was learning. There's a point I got very good at it, but once you get very good at it, you feel as if you can impose to your junior on how this thing is done. And by the way, that limits their learning and your learning as well. I call it this. It's called my way or the highway, where only your way can. There's only one way. And by the way, again, that one limits innovation. It limits solutioning driven, and it does have the ability of disempowering people, but to a lesser extent than the lack of delegation. Because here it's more often when you are working with people, you are delegating. But you are so tied to your way of doing things that you also limit the thinking and the scope that other person is able to take on that task and add in their little flavor in there. Or sometimes you'll be surprised. I've struggled with this quite a lot. But with the growth of the organization and lack of time, you sort of like let go a bit out of necessity. By the way, they say invention is the mother of all necessities, or all the other way around. But what you often realize is that when you do find time to go back to that work, it's actually done much better than the way I would have done it. You learn a lot. You see other ways, and we need to understand. Some of us, I'm learning a lot about AI now and how to implement it in the workspace for productivity. I mean, initially, if you were to come to me as a boss, I would say, but this thing looks like it's written by AI, without you understanding to say, okay, obviously you don't want it to sound like AI, but what does this AI give me that it did not give me before? And how do I then blend it with my me in it, or the me of the person, instead of giving them feedback to say, look, don't just copy and paste. Take these things, synthesize them, add in your own flavor, change the language so that it reflects your tonality and your thinking, because we are used to it, and then bring it to work rather than killing it completely, saying no, AI can't be done. So those are the top 5, Aubrey, and then we can unpack them as we go.
I want you to repeat them just in bullet form, and then we can invite the calls to come in on 011-883-0702. Those beliefs and those assumptions that are holding back your leadership capability in your business. And let me perhaps add that maybe you're not running a business, but maybe you're running a division. In a business. You are a senior manager, and you recognize some of these beliefs that may be holding back your leadership abilities. I recognize the issue of having to lead people that are older than you from a cultural point of view can be a problem. And I remember hearing in one of the programs on one of our platforms where somebody was saying that was a big inhibitor of their ability to lead. Because, culturally, the idea of having to tell somebody who is older than you that you need to do this, you need to be accountable in this way, you didn't do the right thing in this particular sense, can be a very difficult thing. And I'd be interested to find out how we overcome that in our own minds, because sometimes that can be interpreted by some as disrespect. Not only the manager themselves, the young manager themselves, but even the person who is being managed by the young person. So give us a call, 011-883-0702. Epistemic humility. You don't know all things. And you need to be able to be in a position to take that feedback. And you said the last one was?
The last one is my way or the highway.
My way or the highway. And I suppose it goes in, it gets in, it's intertwined with that whole issue of being able to take humility. I mean, take feedback, especially when it's feels a little bit negative. And I would argue that when feedback feels a bit negative, that's probably the feedback you needed the most. Maybe not the feedback you wanted the most, but that might be the feedback you actually need the most. Hence, those kinds of feelings emerge.
You and I should write a book, right? Because you're unlayering the layer. There is so much complexity to this. And maybe one of the next show is the art of giving feedback. Because again, there's a science to giving feedback as a leader. And I've seen this in great play. I mean, I'll give you a typical example. You don't go in shouting and saying, but this was wrong, and that, right? There are a couple of frameworks. One that says, start with giving positive reinforcement and things that a person does very well, right? Once at least you've agreed on that, then bring in, you don't call them negative stuff, but you call them areas of development. And how you do that is when you show the impact of what that person is doing to their work, to the integration of the work in the greater systems of the organization and the outcomes of the team, right? Because people do maybe react much better when there is a rationale and there's a case behind it. But there's a whole lot of science. I mean, one of the things we used to do in consulting every day, they'll call them benefits and concerns. The stop, start, and continue. What is it? Benefits and concerns. What's so beneficial about what are we doing? What are we concerned about? It does conceal egos out of there. There's another framework called stop, start, continue. What is it that we need to start doing? What is it that we need to stop doing? What is it that we need to continue doing? Because what that does then, because if you are able to take the positive feedback, you should be able to take the negative feedback. And when they're given all at once, you are much more receptive. And by the way, even when you give positive feedback and that reinforcement, show them the impact of what they are doing in pushing the cause for the work, the team, and the department or the organization. I think it's very important that people are aware of their impact at work.
On XRC Business Accelerator says, Aubrey, It boils down to the importance of recruitment. Yeah. If your recruitment is top notch, the team will gel and achieve great results. The challenge is people are not honest, and you end up recruiting those that are not in line with your vision. Business is tough, says Ekasi Business Accelerators. Most definitely business is tough. Oh, 011-883-0702. And I suppose that leads to the question that says, even in your recruitment processes, what sort of mindsets, what sorts of strategies, what sorts of notions should you be adopting to your recruitment process in order for you to find a team that is complementary to your vision? But before you even comment on that, please give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. You've heard of all of those limiting belief, I suppose, factors, right? Yeah. Which one do you recognize to be the most prevalent, perhaps, in your leadership style? I'd love to take those calls.
And there could be more, by the way.
Absolutely.
Those are just my top 5.
Absolutely.
I could go on and layer them, right?
Absolutely. And have you perhaps identified that particular, I suppose, weakness in your leadership and overcome it? What did it take?
Yeah.
I'd really love to hear that story on 011-883-0702. Talk to Ekasi Business Accelerators who are saying that the issue is recruitment. If you don't recruit the right people, then you're not going to find that team dynamic that's required to make the value proposition a reality.
Yeah, I'm inclined to say is correct, Aubrey. However, I think that will be oversimplifying the challenges that we face as management. No doubt that recruitment is one of the strategic business processes any business can have, because again, you're trying to recruit for the vision. You're trying to recruit for the values that person has. You're trying to recruit for the capabilities, current capabilities that you need, by the way, and future capabilities. So obviously that ability to learn as the organization evolve. Now try recruiting for all those things and getting it 100% right all the time. And there lies in the complexity, right? Because people come from very diverse backgrounds. People come with different education, different cultural norms, and by the way, capability. I think it's probably much easier. Although I do agree with the people that a lot of people, I mean, I don't know how many times I've come across a person who says, for example, they are very competent in project management, and because everyone all of a sudden thinks project management is a very benign, but there is a whole lot of science to project management. And for those who certify, by the way, then get to realize that there's actually a lot of complexity in project management. I mean, just the art of scheduling alone, Aubrey, let me just entice you. The art of scheduling alone, of how do you sequence jobs? When do you start one? When do you end the other? What does it mean in terms of resourcing? I've found, by the way, in South Africa that we are easily able to position ourselves as saying, I'm an expert in project management, without really understanding that there's actually a lot of science and techniques and technicalities behind a project management. But I mean, we are where we are. So people do tend to overestimate their ability of whatever competencies. But I think for maybe largely for the jobs that we need to do, I'll take it that maybe basic project management will get us by. Yeah. And yet people will say they are experts when they are not. So again, even when we are recruiting for capabilities, our ability to get things right. I'm interested in the stats. If there are any HR practitioners there to say, if you hire 10 people, how many come out as a cultural fit with the right competencies and the right characters? My hypothesis is that the numbers are not high, and in light of the skills gap that we have in the country, and I mean there's a number of things, but I think for me what's important is, yes, I'm not belittling recruitment. I think we must be able to put in all the checks and balances to make sure that we get the right people. But the challenge as a manager is, once you get them in, how do you develop people to be those people that you did not have, right? Because that's where, for me, I think you get to manage the the lack of quality, if I'm using the right word, that comes from an inefficient recruitment process, right? But the question is, what do you do with what you are given? Do you exit the non-starters very fast, and do you work with what we have? And that matrix started talking to say, the one that I spoke about in terms of delegation, to say, what do you do as a leader when you find someone who's highly capable, also highly committed? I'm saying leave those people alone, let them innovate, give them a structure. What do you do when someone is highly committed but they lack capabilities? You coach, right? You teach, you build those skills in. What do you do when you have people that have very low commitment and very low skills? If they are new guys fresh out of varsity, maybe you want to put them in teams and develop that ability. But if these are super experienced people who are supposed to be driving the vision, maybe what do you want to do is exit them. And then the conundrum, right? What do you do with highly capable people who are not committed? How do you make sure that you maybe troll in and enlist them into that vision? Or if you aren't able to do that and you need them, how do you make sure that they don't do the necessary damage? Because they...
I want to ask you this question. In order for us to be aware, in order for us to have this self-awareness of those leadership traits or assumptions or beliefs that are perhaps weak for the vision of the business, how do we develop the self-awareness? In other words, part of the big problem, I would argue, is I might not know that I suffer from an imposter syndrome or that I'm bad at taking feedback if I haven't got the wherewithal, the ability to reflect and see those weaknesses in my own leadership. How do I develop the ability to see that? Because I'm in me.
I know.
Right. So I'm in a very difficult situation in that I don't see these blind spots that may be hindering the progress and the achievements of the business because of me. How do we develop? Because I reckon that might be number 6, right? Our inability to self-reflect.
Well, it's something out of that. We had a long conversation, similar to this, about an hour, where we spoke about 4 intelligence that the leaders need to have, right? We said IQ is about solving problem. This is what allows you to spot needs on the ground and be able to develop value propositions, products and services that fulfill that needs, whether it be musical or be sporting or be mathematically inclined or it's coding, whatever your well-endowedness in terms of gifts and talents are. That's mostly the IQ element, because it's the ability to think and solve problems in different...
That's the analytical stuff.
That's the analytical stuff. That's what helps you with your strategy. The one that helps you, the intelligence that helps you with your leadership, is EQ. EQ, by the way, there's a fantastic book by, I just bought it, by the way. It took me a very long time, but I've just managed to it, by Daniel Goleman, where he unpacks emotional intelligence. He says emotional intelligence is made up of 4 core competencies, right? And by the way, I'm telling you this because you'll start answering some of the questions to say, how do you change or develop those competencies so that we are able to pick up these things? So he says there's 4 competencies to emotional intelligence, and I'm demystifying it, and I'm hoping for an opportunity where we can deep dive into this, because it's fantastic stuff, phenomenal stuff that I think entrepreneurs should reflect on. So self-awareness is one of the core competencies. So social awareness, so meaning you have to have the awareness of yourself and also have the awareness of your environment, how other people behave, how other people react to, also to yourself, right? The other competency is about self-regulation or self-discipline. So it's about how to master the self. And then the 4th competency, it's about relationship management, basically how to master your relationship with others. But let's take self-awareness, for example. One of the things that Goleman talks about, he talks about and it gets spiritual as well, right? the ability to recognize emotion and what they mean for you.
Yes.
And there are a lot of spiritual exercises, yoga being one of them, that helps you unpack some of those things. Understanding behaviors and their triggers. And how do you, and we've had this conversation again, how do you create that breakthrough beyond what you feel and what you think? Right, and there's that element of mindfulness, that ability to be able to interject your thoughts, so that you create that delay between what you think and how you react to what you think. Again, there's a whole lot of spiritual, mental exercise. I find gym for this, by the way, for me to be absolutely because when you run and you think a lot, you come back very calm down and rational, and you're able to
recalibrate
you have to be true to your values. Again, we're just talking the competency of just self-awareness. I said there's 4 of them, and I hope we have a show sometimes where we can unpack deeply into this. But that personal awareness one, it's a very important one, to be able to again because remember, those things, those inhibitors are not only to the self, but they're mostly internal, but they also have to do with other people. So it's I think advisable that you at least increase that core competency of EQ, which is called self-awareness, and also social awareness. And you can start there, and you can come back to say, okay, what do I do now? What disciplines do I need to build? By the way, what's this thing? It's a study. We spoke about it. You and I. Andrew Huberman is one of those things. I'll remember the name of things you can do, by the way, to recalibrate your brain. I mean, things like how do you expose yourself to sunshine in the morning before you even touch your garden?
Walking on soil.
Walking on soil. What works for me as well is in the morning before you even have coffee, have salted water.
Really?
You'll imagine how that balances your hormones. But there's a whole lot of what I'm saying. There's a whole lot of self-help to. And again, unfortunately, it's not for the lazy people, because knowledge is exactly it wants you to go dig deep. At least become aware of it and start practicing it.
Chimbuzi asks, how does one distinguish between a limiting belief and the Dunning-Kruger effect? A cognitive bias where people with low ability in a specific area tend to overestimate their competence, while those with high ability often underestimate theirs. And I imagine that would fall very much within that syndrome?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome.
It's a beautiful thing to have, by the way. I say it's limiting because it limits how you drive effectiveness of your team, drive effectiveness of the organization. But I'm saying it's liberating in a sense that it always creates humility and blind spots. Right? You're always questioning, and high achievers are like that. You always believe you're not good enough, and therefore you always strive to be good enough. And it's a function of exposing yourself. It's a function of getting the knowledge, getting the training where you need to, exposing yourself to mentors as well. That Dunning-Kruger, and it's a fascinating concept. I don't know whether he has explained or
no. Chimbuzi is one of my, and I think it's a she.
It's a fascinating. But you know how I distill it, the Dunning effect. It's that Pareto principle, right? That says the reason why there are very few people at the top is because the Dunning effect is at play for most people. Most people will reach a level of comfort in what we do. We start thinking we're experts. I mean, you can never be an expert in anything. You know what I love about Michael Jordan, by the way, who's, by the way, the greatest basketballer? There's a quote that he always mentions to say that I've missed so many shots when I've needed. In training, I take so many. That's why I win. It's because he understands his greatness is not in his achievements, but is in his weaknesses and how he overcomes his weaknesses, and hence he works at them all the time, right? I mean, the only way, I guess, for me to be able to take away that Dunning effect, is always be humble about what you know. Always know that there's the other 10,000 hour rule.
Yes.
That says, have I reached the 10,000? If not, maybe let me be humble. If I have reached the 10,000 hour rule, have I reached the 15,000? Because it's only with more hours that you get better. So humility is very important.
What you're expressing there is the principle of, I think it's Kaizen, Japanese
Kaizen, yeah.
have
and it's a culture with them as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
That seeking to be better all the time. And I suppose it's also involved, it's the same principles that you find in Kung Fu amongst the Chinese, to say that and I'm not talking about the martial art, I'm talking about the idea that you become ukwepesh.
Yeah.
As we would say here, istwalandwe. Yes, in whatever situation that you need. And the fundamental idea is, of course, humility.
Yeah.
That I am not the expert in this particular field. And because of that humility, you actually become an expert because of your striving. So
to be better than how you were yesterday.
It's a very interesting idea that it is a possibly negative idea if you don't do anything about it. But if you do something about it, your humility or your fear that you might not necessarily be at the right levels might actually be a good thing.
Absolutely. Hence, I said that's imposter syndrome. We're not saying you should not do anything about it.
Yeah.
But it's always a great thing to always have whenever you go into a new situation, because it always questions whether you are good enough, whether you belong there, or whether you should. And by the way, it helps you do something about that. If you don't believe you belong there, you do something about belonging.
Yeah.
Let me learn the language. Let me learn the culture. Let me learn the behaviors in here. Okay, here we do these things. Let me do them better than the next person. And this is how I can belong. And by the way, this is what then creates that level of greatness.
I keep saying that Chimbuzi is a she, and I've never met Chimbuzi, but her or his contributions to the show always feel like they are tapping from a feminine well of knowledge. I don't even know how to explain that, but Chimbuzi, I might be wrong, but I get the sense that you might be a woman. Please confirm or deny. I'd love to take those calls. A very good friend of the shows. I mean, for years, been listening to the show and always positive contribution.
Brilliant stuff.
I want to talk a little bit about the activation of the countermeasures to those weaknesses.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm going back to the idea that there's got to be some level of awareness, of self-awareness, and you've already talked about some of the exercises and the notions we must have.
The word I was looking for, by the way, is neuroscience.
Ah, right. So how
of neuroscience
absolutely.
That you can use to sort of rewire your brain for self-awareness, for even discipline, by the way.
Right.
I mean, one of the things on neuroscience, by the way, they say that it takes 3 weeks for one to develop
the 21-day
new habits.
Yes.
So if you stick at something for 21 days, after 21 days, it actually become a habit.
Right.
So again, it's that persistence and self-awareness to know I'm on day 1, day 2, day 3, up until you get to day 21.
Again, I'm coming back to the issue of awareness in order for us to find ways of activating the remedies to these weaknesses. It's awareness. It's EQ, as you say.
Yeah.
And then the application of the IQ for the steps that must be taken to deal with those kinds of things. How should I know? How would I know as a founder of a business, as a CEO of a company, as a manager of a division, that perhaps I'm not aware of my weakness in taking feedback, for example? How would I, what would I need to hear in order for me to say, hey, maybe this is something that I need to explore?
Yeah, it's performance management, right? You have to see growth in you. Because if you're the same person that you were for the last year, obviously it means you have not assimilated You're not accepted any feedback and assimilated. So it's growth in yourself, growth in your business. And I know with growth in your business, this is where the ego part kicks in, and you think you can't learn anything more, except success of yesterday is not the success of tomorrow. Again, you are going to be severely limited in how you sustain your business. So it's always about the results, right? And I'm saying the results of your business, the results of your team, the results of your the results on yourself, on the growth on yourself, and other people. By the way, as part of the organizational design elements, they put in checks and balances in place. When we say let's do 360 surveys, for example, where people now anonymously they're giving feedback back to the organization, right? So you can put in mechanisms to not only for yourself, by the way, it's also for the leaders of other people within your business, so that collectively you say, how are we doing as leadership? You can take that organizational process element. And hence, this thing that says, when I say leadership is about management, it's exactly that, the ability of a leader to really define something that is outside of management and be able to put in the systems in place and the discipline of execution, so that it makes the leadership pipelining and capabilities even greater. So yeah, I'd say it's that, but it starts with you, Aubrey. I cannot overemphasize how big this self-awareness, especially, let me just say EQ and why leaders must really take this into one of their continuous development element, because it does make you a leader. Because the question is, in Zulu they say, meaning they're all sleeping.
Yeah.
If there was two of you,
you'd wake each other up.
You'll wake each other up, right?
Yeah.
And it's exactly that thing that sometimes people just go through life and it never becomes a reality.
It sounds to me
for them, and unfortunately, as I've said, that's a very deep spiritual journey that you have to undertake for yourself. Self-awareness is absolutely up there.
It sounds to me like it can be somewhat of a lonely journey. In other words,
leadership is
it's an exercise in solitude, to be able to understand these weaknesses in oneself and find the resources, inner and outer, to be able to overcome those weaknesses. It sounds to me like
it is lonely, but it's again up to you to find mentors. To find coaches, life coaches and business coaches. It's up to you. If you've realized that now you've got a developmental gap and you need to start on your journey, again, you need to be a self-starter in there. We had something that we got out of the Stanford called the lab, the strategy labs. I forgot the name, but where we get peers, other founders, and we get once, I think every 3 months together. We talk about the problems of our business. They become like our counsel. So we almost like peer review each other. You can set up those mechanisms, by the way, with some of your founding friends or some of your founding members within your value chain. And again, it's up to you to get it done, unfortunately. And you're right when you say leadership is a lonely journey. And you just have to crystallize it by saying that leadership is when things go wrong, you are to blame, but when things go right, you can't take the credit. It's just that, unfortunately, the nature of the game. You only become folklore as a leader, and not because your managers must take and again, it comes with that humility that says whenever you are winning, you pass that win to your reports. But whenever there's failure, you accept it as a leader, and you are the one who takes the fall or the blame for it.
Yeah, we had a very interesting conversation with a very good friend of mine, a lady by the name of Shanaz Trithui, and we were really breaking down the difference between responsibility and accountability.
Yeah.
And I think that really what you're saying here is that while we may understand our responsibilities as leaders, we need to also break into the accountability of that responsibility.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying is that requires a lot of humility.
A lot of humility.
But not just humility that is acted upon.
It's active. Level 5 leadership. That's what Jim Collins talks about.
How do people get in touch with you?
At the top. is about humility. So I am available at info@ntiyisoconsulting.co.za. Alternatively, you can visit our website, which is www.ntiyisoconsulting.co.za.